What's up guys, Ams4Bucks here. Most of you may remember 2019 for Old Town Road, PewDiePie vs T-Series, or the final year before the human malware changed everything in 2020. Many tech enthusiasts also remember it as the year when AMD CPUs finally caught up to Intel for IPC, single-core performance, and gaming, while continuing their absolute dominance in productivity performance. All of this was achieved while sipping power compared to the competition. This turning point in the age-old AMD vs Intel CPU battle was achieved by none other than the Zen 2 architecture, which was Ryzen 3000 series desktop. What made this architecture revolutionary was its world-first TSMC 7nm FinFET process node, doubling of L3 cache versus the previous Zen and Zen Plus, and a totally new approach to CPU manufacturing and silicon layout that AMD continues to use to this day for their desktop CPUs, workstation, and server CPUs called chiplet. Zen 2 moved AMD away from a traditional monolithic CPU design by splitting the processor into small core complex dies, also known as CCDs, for the cores and cache, plus a separate I/O die for memory, PCI Express, USB, SATA, and chipset functions, all linked by the Infinity Fabric. This made the architecture more scalable, improved yields and manufacturing costs, and fixed the scheduling and NUMA issues seen in older Threadripper multi-chip designs by giving the system a centralized I/O die that made the whole CPU appear as unified. It also delivered around 15% higher IPC than Zen Plus, much higher boost clocks with up to 4.7 GHz on the 3950X, doubled L3 cache to reduce latency in memory-sensitive workloads like games, and benefited from TSMC's 7nm FinFET process to improve transistor density, efficiency, and thermal performance. All of this meant that AMD could create the world's first mainstream desktop 12 and 16 core CPUs, the Ryzen 9 3900X and 3950X. The core thread count limit for mainstream desktop platforms was previously 8 cores and 16 threads on AMD's Ryzen 7 2700X and Intel's Core i9 9900K. This placed AMD in a very dominant position for productivity and multitasking workloads compared to the competition in this era, with the 12-core 3900X being at a similar price to the 8-core 9900K, placing them in direct competition. This, combined with the higher single-threaded performance and reduced memory latency, allowed AMD to finally catch up to Intel for gaming performance, an area Intel previously had been winning for many years at this point, and in many cases by a significant margin. However, there was one drawback to Zen 2. It did require software-level scheduling for the multi-CCD models, specifically the Ryzen 9s and Threadrippers, to prevent games from splitting the load onto cores that were on separate CCDs. This resulted in a significant latency penalty, which could dramatically reduce gaming performance. This is why early reviews of Zen 2 did have mixed results for the Ryzen 9 parts depending on the game, an issue that eventually got resolved later via Windows Core Scheduler updates. This cross-CCD latency problem is something that still affects Ryzen 9 models today, even the latest 9950X, as the chiplet layout has remained the same since Zen 2, although there's leaked information that the upcoming Zen 6 architecture that is arriving later this year or early next year may finally have resolved this issue. Now, almost exactly 7 years later, how does my Ryzen 9 3900X hold up in 2026? Does PBO or an all-core overclock improve performance by a meaningful margin? It's time for the benchmarks. So, for the test system, it's my PC that I recently built a custom loop for in my previous video, featuring the AMD Ryzen 9 3900X, of course, cooled by that Corsair Hydra X custom loop and an MSI MPG X570 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi. 32GB of Corsair Vengeance RGB-RS DDR4 that's overclocked to 3800 MHz CL18, a couple of Intel 660p NVMe drives, and an XFX Magnetic Air Limited Edition AMD Radeon RX 7800 XT with 16GB of GDDR6 to ensure nothing is holding back the 3900X for these tests. All of this is housed in a black NZXT H6 Flow and powered by the Gigabyte G750H. For the different types of CPU tuning, I'll be comparing the stock results to a PBO tune with a 170 watt power limit, 95 amp TDC, and 140 amp EDC, with no scaler, no boost override, and a 62.5 mV undervolt. The other tuning setup is a static all-core overclock, running at a locked 4.4 GHz, 1.35 volts, with the load line calibration set to mode 4. And yes, I think I might have golden sample silicon because that is quite a high all-core clock for a 3900X. Good for me, I guess. So starting off, we have Cinebench R23 with both multi-core and single-core tests. The stock results set a baseline of 18,222 for the multi-core and 1332 for the single-core. The PBO results were 5% faster for the multi-core and 2% faster for the single-core. And finally, the 4.4 GHz all-core overclock is 6% faster than PBO for multi-core and an impressive 11% faster than stock. However, the single core was 3% slower than the PBO result. Looking at the impact of the two tuning setups on sustained power consumption and thermals when under full Cinebench multi-core load, the PBO tune had identical package power draw when compared to stock, ran 2 degrees Celsius cooler, most likely thanks to that undervolt. An impressive result regarding power and thermal efficiency. This means you won't need a cooler upgrade if you want to run PBO on a 3900X. The all-core overclock results were also rather surprising, only consuming 12 watts more package power than stock and only running 5 degrees Celsius warmer. What does this mean for efficiency in terms of performance per watt? Well, as you can see here, the stock baseline results are represented as 100%, with PBO being 4.7% more efficient than stock, and the all-core overclock being 3.2% more efficient than stock. The all-core overclock result is especially surprising as usually when maxing out an all-core overclock on a CPU, performance per watt efficiency is thrown out the window, but that isn't the case here. In fact, the opposite is true when comparing to stock results. As I said earlier, this could possibly be golden sample silicon of a 3900X. Now for the gaming benchmarks. 9 games were tested, all at 1080p medium preset or equivalent to ensure that there was no PU limited scenarios on the 26.5.2 driver version using MSI Afterburner to log performance results. First game on this list is PUBG, and the results for the 3 tuning setups was quite impressive. The PBO tune was 7% faster than stock for the average frame rate, a whopping 61% faster for the 1% low, and a substantial 29% for the 0.1% low. Perhaps even more impressive is the all-core overclock results. 11% faster than stock for the average frame rate, a groundbreaking 119% faster for the 1% low, and an insane 203% faster for the 0.1% low. To say PUBG had significantly improved frame time consistency with the all-core overclock would be an understatement. This translates into much smoother gameplay with far less stuttering. The next game is Fortnite in OG Zero build, and this one is a bit of a mixed bag. PBO is slower than stock, and the all-core overclock is barely faster. I would call this run variance depending on where you are on the map. PBO is 1% slower than stock for the average, 1% faster for the 1% low, and 7% slower for the 0.1% low. The all-core overclock is 1% faster than stock for the average. The 1% low is identical, and the 0.1% low is 4% faster. So indeed, practically identical performance between these 3 states of tune in Fortnite. Forza Horizon 5 has mixed results once again, but this time there's at least a more definitive winner of the 3 states of tune. PBO is 1% slower than stock for the average, 2% slower for the 1% low, and identical for the 0.1% low. The all-core overclock is a more positive outcome, 3% faster than stock for the average, 3% faster for the 1% low, and again identical 0.1% low. Forza Horizon 6 seems to scale more linearly than 5 with the 3 states of tune. PBO is 1% faster than stock for the average, identical 1% low, and 1% faster for the 0.1% low. The all-core overclock is 3% faster than stock for the average, 3% faster for the 1% low, and 5% faster for the 0.1% low. Car Mechanics Simulator 2018 is a weird anomaly among the 9 games tested. Stock and PBO are identical overall, but the all-core overclock is 3% faster for the average, 3% faster for the 1% low, and a weirdly insane 324% faster for the 0.1% low. This result really doesn't make any sense, but the numbers don't lie, I guess. Car Mechanics Simulator 2021 has a more expected outcome than its predecessor. PBO is 2% faster than stock for the average, 3% faster for the 1% low, and 2% slower for the 0.1% low. The all-core overclock is 3% faster than stock for the average, 4% faster for the 1% low, and 3% faster for the 0.1% low. Counter-Strike 2 has a clear winner. PBO is 1% faster than stock for the average, and 3% slower for the 1% low. The Dust 2 benchmark map telemetry doesn't include 0.1% low results, hence them being absent from the graph. The all-core overclock is 4% faster than stock for the average, and 3% faster for the 1% low. BeamNG drive with 24 traffic cars is an interesting one. PBO is 3% faster than stock for the average, 5% faster for the 1% low, and a ridiculous 25 times faster for the 0.1% low for some reason. The all-core overclock is 2% faster than stock for the average, 6% faster for the 1% low, and again a wild 25 times faster for the 0.1% low. Assetto Corsa Evo has quite linear scaling. PBO is practically identical to stock for the average, 1% slower for the 1% low, and the 0.1% low is practically identical. The all-core overclock is 2% faster than stock for the average, 1% faster for the 1% low, and 1% faster for the 0.1% low. So, to conclude the gaming benchmarks, I've averaged all the results across the 9 games tested, and here's what I got. PBO is 1% faster than stock for the average, 2% faster for the 1% low, and 9% faster for the 0.1% low. The all-core overclock is 4% faster than stock for the average, 6% faster for the 1% low, and a substantial 29.2% faster for the 0.1% low. In conclusion, PBO is worth using if you use the same settings I did, as you won't even increase power consumption or temperatures to get more performance. If you have enough cooling, an all-core overclock may be worth considering if you get lucky with the silicon lottery as I did. Will you notice the difference in performance after applying either of these tunes? Well, it depends. Some games had gains that you would notice, such as PUBG, whereas others didn't, like Assetto Corsa Evo. Overall, Zen 2 and the Ryzen 9 3900X are still decent processors 7 years after its release. After all, Zen 2 is still being used in the latest consoles in APU form, such as the PS5 and Xbox Series X. But because those are APUs, they have half the L3 cache per core when compared to desktop Zen 2 CPUs, and also run at significantly lower power and clocks, which means Zen 2 desktop CPUs are most likely 20 to 30% faster in games than the APUs found in the latest consoles. What this means is that Zen 2 still gets solid performance in modern AAA titles and will do so for a while longer, as it's significantly faster than the latest consoles, which is what most game developers optimize for. The 9-game average showed solid high refresh rate averages for all 3 states of tune. However, the 1% low and especially 0.1% figures leave some to be desired if you're looking for a truly consistent high refresh rate experience. Zen 3 and especially Zen 3 X3D models would be a great drop-in upgrade if you want such an experience while saving money by staying on AM4 and keeping your current motherboard and DDR4 RAM, which is more important than ever in this memory crisis, as we know. Well, that's everything. See you in the next one.